Welcome back to the Heap. This is Dishelved with Adam White. Today I'm going to be talking about the new annotated Frankenstein by Mary Shelley with annotations by Leslie Klinger. The astonishment which I had at first experienced on this discovery soon gave place to the delight and rapture. After so much time spent in painful labor, to arrive at once at the summit of my desires was the most gratifying consummation of my toils. But this discovery was so great and overwhelming that all steps by which I had been progressively led to it were obliterated, and I beheld only the result. What had been the study and desire of the wisest men since creation of the world was now within my grasp. Not that, like a magic scene, it all opened upon me at once. The information I obtained was of a nature rather to direct my endeavors so soon as I should point them in the direction of the object of my search, than to exhibit the object already accomplished. I was like the Arabian who had been buried with the dead and found a passage to life aided by one glimmering and seemingly ineffectual light. That's from his discovery, Frankenstein's discovery uh, of how to give life to an inanimate object. Uh, Again, this is the annotated edition I'm reading from. They use the 1818 text, which was the original. They do show the differences in the annotations between it and the one that Mary Shelley later revised. But the original is a better one, and that's a good idea to go with this one. You can also get it in 100 different versions. You can get it on Kindle. Uh, it's just a great work of horror and science fiction by an 18-year-old woman who was way ahead of her time. This was a story within a story within a story. Uh, there's three different narrators. There's the ship's captain that is headed into the Arctic to try to pass over the Arctic Circle. There's Victor Frankenstein, and then there's the monster itself, which is it a monster or not? That's one of the things you're kind of left to decide, or why it becomes a monster. Um, uh, they also, the story follows the ship's captain near the Arctic that discovers a very ill Victor Frankenstein. And Frankenstein is very uh, dodgy on trying to explain why he's there, but he eventually decides to confide his story in the ship's captain and let him know what it is he had accomplished. Frankenstein then takes over as the narrator. He details his love of science and his creation of what he deems the monster. It also talks about his good family life. He had a father and mother who really cared for him. He had two brothers, and he had a first cousin whose family died and was moved in with them at a young age, and who was destined to be his wife, which, because of the time, was something that was done, which today you wouldn't want to marry your first cousin uh, for various reasons. But uh, to him, it was just kind of decided from early life that she would be his bride. Uh, his love of science is what leads to the creation of Frankenstein's monster. He reads all the books, they call it natural philosophy, and he really loves science, and he befriends his professors at his college that he attends in Ingolstadt. And he really just dives into trying to do something that no one has ever done before, which that passage is illustrating when he first comes up with the idea and the success of creating life from nothing. Um, Frankenstein becomes immediately horrified at what he's done. And I mean, he just immediately retreats from the creature and just ignores it and doesn't have anything to do with it. And he leaves and stays gone for a while. And when he comes back, the creature is gone. And he just is like, well, that's something off my plate now. I don't have to worry about it anymore. Uh, I shouldn't have done that probably, but maybe this will be the end of it. Well, of course, it's the not. Uh, he re encounters the monster later, and the monster takes over as the narrator, which is interesting because that's not, most people are familiar with the movies, and the monster is not exactly talkative. But the monster is fully lucid and a good conversationalist in this story when he becomes the narrator. So, again, a story within a story within a story. He explains his travails of learning of what it is and how it is to be human and who he learned from. And it's really a sad story. He has to figure out everything on his own. He's out there with no language skills. He is aware of himself and his surroundings, but he really just doesn't know what to do. Well, he observes people, he observes a family, and tries to get himself involved with that family, and it backfires. And everything he learns more about the cruelty of humanity than of anything else in the love and like the life that Victor Frankenstein had had, where his family really loved him and supported him, and Frankenstein didn't do that for his creation. Um, After that, Frankenstein takes back over the narrative of the story and describes the horror of what happens to him from the creature. And I use creature and monster interchangeably because he is a creature, but would he have been a monster had the circumstances been different in the way he discovered his life and how things worked? Um, and then the story ends with the ship's captain discussing the end of Frankenstein and what he has told him and should he believe it, and what, you know, is sort of the moral of the story. I liked it. I could have probably done without the ship's captain part, but that was kind of the trope of the time, a confessional kind of story. And so he had to have, Frankenstein had to have someone to uh, confess to. And so I do understand why it's there. But personally, I think the story could have survived without it, but it's not a lot, so it doesn't take away from the story. It's just a lot of letters between the ship's captain and his sister, and he explains how he found Frankenstein, and then he told him this amazing story. Um, Again, I understand that's why it's there. The introductory material and annotations are excellent. It gives you a very good feeling of the time period that this was written in and about Mary Shelley's life and her marriage to Percy Bysshe Shelley and their association with Lord Byron and how she originally came up with the story as they were kind of stormed in at a residence, and they each decided to come up with a horror story, and this is what she ended up coming up with, was partly based on a dream. And just the rest came from her imagination. And again, she was only 18, maybe 19 at the time, and it's just amazing what she came up with. Um, Also, I went with the annotated version because, quite frankly, if there's an annotated version, that's the one I want to get. I love all the extra stuff. It's kind of like behind the scenes DVD content on what you're reading. So if you, especially if you come across something that's unfamiliar because of the time difference in when this was written and today, you might not be familiar with some things. The annotations explain those. Again, I said the annotations also explain the differences between the later version that Mary Shelley had edited and changed from the original version, but the story you get is the original 1818 text, which is the best version, I believe. And the editor of the series, Leslie Klinger, believes that as well. It's a great work of literature. She was a pioneer of horror and science fiction. This dates before, Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. It is definitely a science fiction novel. It's definitely a horror novel. There are very horrific things that happen in this. She wrote it in the style of her time, but it transcends that into a story for all time. Kind of a parable that you read about being responsible for your creation. Uh, it illustrates that science is a good thing, but great responsibility comes with it. Uh, had Victor Frankenstein taught the monster and shown him the care that his family had given him, if he had shown that same care to the creature, would he have become a monster? Would the story have played out as it did? Would Victor Frankenstein's horrific life have happened and ended the way that it did if he had just taken time to teach his creation? Um, it's definitely something you should read at least once in your life because of the accomplishment that it is. Uh, I liked it. It's not my favorite book that I've ever read, but I did really like it. And you can see here on the cover they've got the Frankenstein monster from the movies, which is funny because the monster is not really like that in the book. He, like I said, he ends up being fully articulate and very devious, and he's not the kind of dumb lumbering creation that you see in the movies. Movies totally different. You couldn't really film this as is because it would be a bunch of talking heads because you're just getting the narration of the story. So I understand why they changed it. And I love the movies. Don't get me wrong. Frankenstein and especially Bride of Frankenstein, uh, which both take from this book. Uh, so definitely watch the movies too. But the book is its own thing. It's definitely worth your reading time, and I highly recommend it. And like I said, get this annotated version if you want all the backstory to go with it, because it's really fun to read about all that kind of stuff and gives you a real context for when the story was written and who wrote it. And I really enjoy reading those things. If you don't, you can get, like I said, you can get the version that you choose. There's Kindle versions, there's 100 different paperbacks and hardbacks. It's out of it's in public domain, so anybody can publish it. But definitely do yourself a favor and read the 1818 version. Make sure that's the one you're getting. Thanks for listening. I'll see you the next time here at the Heap.